Welcome back to the Chasing Common Ground podcast. And I am joined by the one and only Justin Jones. So, Justin, I've had the opportunity to be on your show, the Assemble Performance Show. And so, if anybody is looking for more podcasts to listen to, that's another one that you can listen to. And some of the notable things that I want to start off with right out of the gates is talking about well, after you introduce yourself, I'd love if you expand into what truly is a hybrid athlete if you're describing it to somebody who might be over 40, just because it's kind of been like known as different things throughout the years, throughout the generations. So I want it to be as relatable as possible. But go ahead and introduce yourself.
Awesome. Hey, Chris, it's good to be here. I appreciate you letting me come on. It's fun. I like your Zoom background. This is very on brand. I like the Tony Stark style thing on the whiteboard in the background, whatever that is. That sticks out to me. But yeah, so I'm Justin Jones, the owner of Assemble Performance. I coach hybrid athletes. We can get more into what that is in a minute, but broadly speaking, that's anybody training for strength and endurance goals at the same time. So I've worked with people all the way from somebody who just wants a better body composition and not to get winded walking up the stairs to people that want to run ultra marathons and be as strong as possible, and people who are in the military, special operations, fire, police. It works well for those more tactical athletes. But yeah, I've worked with a wide range of people, and I find hybrid is super inclusive. So I'm happy to go more into that. But yeah, I've been coaching for a good while now. I started at Assemble Performance in 2022. Yeah, 2022. My time is all messed up since COVID. But I've been training since 2013, training strength and endurance myself, helping people out with templates and things like that. I was in the military myself, hence the tactical focus. But yeah, that's me. And then to your question about hybrid training for those over 40, I have a lot of athletes actually over 40. I have a few athletes that just started with me that are one is 50 and one is 55, and they're both Spartan athletes, very dedicated Spartan athletes going for a Spartan trifecta, which is the three different Spartan distances in a year. But yeah, I'm happy to go as deep as you want into what hybrid training is. So yeah, I mean, you tell me how deep you want me to go here.
Well, I think even just the way that you explained it with it being training for strength and conditioning, like basically for strength and performance, that is going to make it relatable to people just from the get-go. So what I'd actually love to do is to dive a bit deeper into like your military background, kind of like what inspired that, what got you into that.
Okay, yeah, totally. So, I mean, I grew up in a really rural, conservative area, very, a lot of most people join the military or work construction, right? Not to crap on the area, like it's rural America, that's what it is. But I kind of always felt like I wanted to join the military. I grew up watching like Black Hawk Down and all these war movies and reading like Lone Survivor and all this stuff. So I really wanted to join the military from a pretty young age. Very big like Memorial Day. I know you're in Canada, so it might not be similar, but we have Memorial Day over here, and there's a lot of what you say like services and stuff that you go. So even from a young kid, seeing all these old vets and everything get dressed up and do all this stuff. So pretty much my whole life, I was like, I'm going to join the military. It's what I'm going to do. So I was in a kind of a near-death experience in middle school where my appendix ruptured and I was in the hospital for about a month. Had a few surgeries, was in like a medical coma for about a week. It was kind of a pretty serious ordeal for a kid. And I came out of that like I was 13 at the time, and I kind of had this realization that life is pretty short, which you probably shouldn't have at that young of an age, but I did. And I was like, I have to do something pretty purposeful. And so that was where I really started to look at, all right, what am I going to do when I finish school? I was very active in sports, and I really set my sights on the special operations world. And so I knew those were pretty high attrition rate. A lot of people don't make their goals there. So I started training pretty hard then, even in middle school. Sports, training outside of sports, just trying to make myself as fit as possible. And then yeah, I did that all throughout high school. Joined the Navy. Ended up getting a concussion and getting dropped out of the pipeline I was in. And then I kind of made the switch to coaching while I got a new job. Ended up doing more of a desk job type in the Navy, and really started focusing on coaching before I got out because that was kind of my other path before I joined was I was either going to join or I was going to go get my exercise science degree. Didn't have the money to go get my degree, so it was I'm going to join the military, and here we are, full circle. Things came back around, so.
I like it. And there's probably going to be people out there who kind of have found themselves on similar paths and maybe they haven't taken the steps that you've taken. What is it like to, I know that you've done a lot of calls with people who actually literally have been on similar paths. What's it like to see like sort of like a portion of you in someone else when you're in like a discovery call, just kind of getting to know people?
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? Like when it didn't work out for me, I really had kind of a big loss of identity because this was what I'd poured my whole life into. And it's a very like type A field where might not be the healthiest mental approach sometimes when you're in it because you just kind of have to survive those selection courses, right? But when it didn't work out for me, I saw a lot of people ahead of me, like 2, 3 years ahead of me who it didn't work out for. And they looked miserable. They were jaded. They were like, not that everybody's this way, but a lot of people let it get to them, become very jaded with the world. Like I put all my effort into this and it still didn't work out. Like, woe is me, right? And so I just took this mindset of I put 110% of myself, even though that's not possible, but I put everything I had into this thing. I'm just going to take that and put it into the rest of my life and crush the next thing. I'm not going to dwell on the past because that's a lot of resentment comes from that. And so I can definitely see for me, like that helps me when I talk to people in the tactical world because I really like working with them, people training for selection courses, people on the job. If I didn't take that mindset early on, I can see how I would have a lot of animosity towards these people, almost like the people that pull you down are only the people that are jealous of you kind of thing.
Yep.
And so if I had this insecurity and this almost self-hatred about how things worked out and this resentment, there's no way I could help these people because I would be resentful and jealous and whatever other envious of their situation, right? Um, and I don't know where that came from. Maybe just my consistent, I've listened to podcasts and audiobooks since I was like, 13 years old. I've been just like, that was my form of entertainment. So maybe I just had some intellectual like wisdom from, people older than me at that point from years of just listening to people talk about their experiences. But I'm pretty lucky that was how I thought of things because there are a lot of other people that I know that got out of the Navy and they're like, oh man, I wasted that whole time just being super resentful of this and always thinking about the past, and I didn't set myself up, and now I'm out of the Navy and have nothing for me. Um,
Yeah.
does that make
Yeah, I
sense?
mean, you illuminated something that I think is important for everybody to understand, and it's something that I refer to often. I believe it's called the crab bucket mentality. And there's actually a Canadian artist named Chaos, and I think he has a song called like Crab Bucket, and that's why it resounds with me because I get the song in my head and I think of the concept. But generally, the concept is that if we were in the bottom of a crab bucket and we tried to climb out, the other crabs in the bucket wouldn't let you. And so it's simply the fact that that is the environment in which you dwell, that you will never get out of the bucket. And so sometimes I reflect on there's a variety of different environments where I can relate this to. So a person might first think that I would relate this to like fitness industry, but I could also put a spin on it and relate it to retail, or I could relate it to like teaching, or I could relate it to like the medical field, just to basically eliminate the chance of anybody calling me out for picking on them because I just listed off so many spaces. But generally speaking, like our awareness of self makes a huge difference in our ability to help others. So just to be able to hear you kind of basically say that in your own words, I think was super, super important. One thing that I always like diving into a little bit is that you're a family man. So there's more to you than just coaching. So how did that come to be? Like you're pretty busy with the military, you're getting into coaching, you're a busy guy. Like how did that all kind of unfold for you?
Yeah, totally. So my wife and I have been together since high school, actually, or technically middle school even. So it's been a long time. We had a short break there, but as that stuff happens, right? But yeah, when I joined the Navy, she was finishing up school, and then she moved out with me. I was in California at the time for a few months over the summer before she went back to finish her degree. And then we got married and moved here to Virginia Beach. Well, we moved to Florida first for a little bit as the military moves you around, but we've been here for in Virginia Beach for about what is it, 2020 now. So we got here year of COVID, everything was shut down. But yeah, so we've been together for a long time. That's been awesome. She's the most supportive person ever in all of my endeavors, and she's a great parent and just a great partner in general. So I'm really lucky with that because I didn't have as much foresight as I do now when we first got together and things. So I'm very lucky that we gravitated towards each other. And then, yeah, I've got a son. He's 18 months old on the 9th of December. So I don't know when this is coming out, but as of right now, it's a few weeks away. And that's been a super big learning experience for me with everything else going on because I'm always somebody who's pushing, I've got a day job right now. I've got the business. I'm always pushing things, right? And so having a family, having a son, it didn't really hit me as much having before we had our son because my wife is also very goal driven. She just finished her master's degree. We have a German Shepherd, very active, go out and play, like kind of always on the go. And then having our son really just forced me to slow down in a good way and reevaluate things because now everything I do, I'm evaluating, is this in line with my priorities in life? If I'm taking time away from the family, is that intentional or is it kind of accidental? And then it kind of even daily just forces me to reflect on, is this what I want to be doing right now, or do I want to do something else?
Hmm.
And it also helped me reframe things like having a kid. I feel like the biggest impact you can have on the world is being a parent, or just to somebody else in general, but being a parent is huge because you're forming this kid's whole worldview, right? And then if you can raise a kid that turns into an adult that is a good human that wants to help people and is happy with themselves internally and everything, that's going to cascade out and they're going to do that to other people. And then that is an exponential effect on the world. Not that you can't have a huge effect on the world without kids, but it's just been a real focus of mine recently because it helps ground me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And like even to reinforce your point, because like it makes sense to be cautious about making statements about how impactful it would be to have a kid in your life kind of thing. And like typically, if people really think about it, if anybody was going to be offended, I should be offended. But no, I'm not. Because like I'll add some more context here because when I reflect on life and when I reflect on like sense of purpose and I reflect on just all the things that make life what it is, like I've had deep conversations with my dad, and my dad was like, "Yeah, like having kids was like the most purposeful part of my whole life." And he knows that I'm like 32 and in the stage that I'm in, but then also I have the ability to take initiative with certain things in my life and how I lead my life. So a person could embrace this attitude of like life kind of happens to you, like you can't do anything about anything, or you can still take on roles. Like there's tons of times when I will actually be more of a role model figure than I could have been. Like I could just make terrible decisions through my life that nobody should model after, or I can kind of think about my role in the people who are already in my life, and I can make decisions that are better as a role model. And additionally, just like sort of showing up in the micro aspects of people's lives. Like life doesn't go perfectly, and so sometimes we find ourselves filling in gaps for people. Like if let's say there was a soccer team that just needed some support with additional coaching. There's lots of like coaches of soccer teams that might be like an uncle or something. Or for example, I think one of my favorite examples, and this is probably the easiest one for people to understand and relate to, is when we look to social media, when we look to YouTube, there's actually like very few genuine connection people making content. It's a lot of like, it's almost like this scaffolding that's predictable, where the person gets your attention by being polarizing or calling something out, and then almost always they have like some kind of a course that teaches you to do what they did, but what they did kind of lacks substance. Like they're not necessarily teaching you to value the things in your life. They're not necessarily teaching you to be grateful. They're not necessarily teaching you to kind of like understand where you went wrong or be humble. It's always kind of like this arrogant bravado, and a lack of like people will teach you to do things without teaching you to be responsible for the things that you do. So like we can take all these shortcuts and do all these hacks, but at the end of the day, there's things that we might have done to get there that should be holding us responsible. And if nobody does, then that's where you get that kind of crash and burn effect. So all that said, like no matter where somebody is at in their life, the art of pouring into people and the art of just kind of like having a sense of purpose beyond the financial gain and beyond like these official titles and just like leaning into the fact that like you can have an impact on youth no matter where you're at in your life. And it's always been a thing. Like that's why kids who are in high school are encouraged to volunteer. They're encouraged to model good behavior for younger students. There is almost always opportunities for that. And I say this because I did most of those things as a kid. So if anybody hears a statement or gets the implication that if they aren't a parent that they're missing out, well, take the opportunity to do parental things. Like if
And
you like I'll be done this ramble shortly and then you can add on, but like
yeah, go ahead.
if I ever have to go to the police station for a vulnerable sector check to be allowed to work with kids with all the clearance and whatnot, then I know that I'm doing something that kind of fulfills the role of like supporting someone's growth and supporting someone's direction and supporting someone's purpose. And so if anybody's ever in doubt, just look for the roles that you can do in your community that require you to go get a vulnerable sector check, because then you know that it is the gravity of what you're doing means so much that they want to make sure that you're the right person for the job. And if you're not the right person for the job, you need to check yourself and make some corrections in your life because you should be able to pass one of those checks. All that said, I'd love to hear what you had on your mind, Justin.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to paint it as the rosiest picture, right? In the interest of being real, because I pride myself on that. Like being a parent's been the hardest thing I've ever done, secondarily to starting and growing a business. And there are sacrifices, right? Like I know a lot of other coaches and people in general, personally, who are child-free by choice, and like I get that, you know. Um, Having a kid was a very deliberate choice for me, but there was a time when it was like, hey, do I ever want to have kids? Like I had a lot of I just wanted to make sure that for me, I didn't want to have a kid and then resent that decision. And so I put a lot of thought into it. And so I've dove down the rabbit holes of like why people choose to be child free or why people choose to have kids and just made sure I was kind of thinking about every angle. And so I definitely understand people who also don't want to have kids. And I do see others in the coaching space and not in the coaching space who've chosen not to have kids. And they definitely have more time for their careers, for their own personal interests. Like it's not all rainbows and sunshine, and anybody that's a parent knows that. And I think anybody that's a parent does sometimes grieve the time that they may not have to do other things for themselves in a sense, not in the sense of I hate having this kid because I love my son, I love my family, and I wouldn't change it for the world. But there are, you know, sacrifices you have to make. And so I can say for me personally, being a dad has made me a better human to myself, even because looking at this young kid, um, and seeing just how innocent they are and how they look at you like you're just a god and you know everything, it gives you the sense of, oh, I need to make sure that I'm in check and step up and like be the person this kid needs me to be. But it also helps you be kinder to yourself, which I've struggled with my whole life. And it's made me better at coaching because I coach a lot of busy parents. And so, even from a just business perspective, it's helped me understand their internal worlds better and some of the strategies because I'm also struggling with those things as far as how do I get my training in around being a parent, making sure my spouse has time for herself, all these other things, right? So, it's very difficult though. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. It forces you to really look in the mirror at yourself and be very vulnerable, about kind of your shortcomings, even emotionally, right?
Hmm.
Because I'm a super busy person and my son needs somebody to hold emotional space for him. I can't always have my wife do that. That's super unfair. Even though she's a wonderful person and she's a first grade teacher. She's amazing at it and she does it a lot. But yeah, like for me, it's made me a better person, but you can definitely have a huge impact on the world elsewise. I know a lot of coaches that, I wouldn't say a lot of, I know a handful of coaches that are kind of open about the fact that they've chosen not to have kids,
Hmm.
and or not have kids yet. And they're, um, 10 years down the line than me and they're, way farther in their careers. Like there is a sacrifice I've had to make. Like, yeah, I want to get my master's, I want to do all these things in the future, but it's going to have to happen a little slower. And for me, I'm fine with that because I get to be with my son, have an impact on him. It helps me be more grounded in the world and be more real. But for somebody else, like that might not be worth it, and that's not a bad thing, you know. As long as you're just a good human in general, like there's no wrong choice here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the general rule that if all people can pass the vulnerable sector check at their local police station,
I've
then
never
they're
heard of
living their
that.
life well. Uh,
I don't know if they have those here.
it probably exists, just different terminology, but generally it's like they
Probably.
do a background check just to make sure
Hmm.
there's no red flags so that you can work in close proximity to kids without
I think
any.
they do that. I think they do that here. It must just be called something else.
Yeah, like for us, as long as it's a volunteer position, we don't have to pay for it. It gets waived. But if it's not a volunteer position, then I think you have to pay like $100 or something.
Mm.
And there may be police who are listening to this, so if I'm wrong, just let me know in the comments. But nonetheless, I think these are important topics that we're diving into, and these are things that kind of give people a bit more substance to work with in life. That's why my podcast is kind of a little bit more wholesome than your average podcast, because I'm like, well, I've heard all the science and I've heard all the nutrition and I've heard all these like surface level things, and I want to deep dive into like the more deeper, meaningful things. Which brings me to my next point, because you revealed a lot of things that a lot of people think about, like whether it be like they have to make time for this or they have to lovingly sacrifice that, or it's just there's a lot of like moving parts, and they might be actually thinking about what they used to do. Like let's put ourselves in the shoes of somebody who is in their 40s, and as their 20s, they were like a really ambitious athlete, but now they have so many other things in their life. They're taking on the identity of like a very busy parent. They're trying to make strides in their career. But then you and I both know that it truly is in their best interest to look after their health through some kind of structured program, but there's a lot of resistance for them, and they're just like, no, I can't do it now. What would be kind of something that you would take them through, or maybe some things that you might bring up for them to help them help themselves?
Mm. Yeah, totally. Good question. So the one thing that I like to look at personally is how am I going to be my best self for the people in my life? Because you can't pour from an empty cup is the phrase that I like to use. So how am I going to fill my cup up so I can be there for my son, for my wife, for the other people in my life, for my athletes? And so I like to think of filling your cup not as a selfish thing because a lot of parents, you've got dad guilt, mom guilt's the real big thing. My wife, is a mom, so she deals with that more than me, right? I don't have personal experience with that. I do have some dad guilt, but it's not as severe as the mothers tend to generally. Maybe in some cases it is, but there's a lot of guilt around doing your own thing. Oh, I'm going to go do this for myself. So that means I'm taking away from somebody else. And that's not always the case because sometimes by doing something that fills you up, it can make you a better, or I won't say sometimes, I'll say all the time, doing something that fills you up is going to make you better for the people in your life. And so for me, if I'm able to get 45 to 90 minutes of a workout in the morning, then I'm a better person throughout the whole day for my athletes, for my family, so I can show up. I'm not thinking throughout the whole day, oh man, I got to get my workout in later. It's not in the back of my mind. I'm not stressed about it. I can be completely present. And so that's something that I'm constantly struggling with and constantly working on myself. But when it comes to an athlete, I want to know what are they what lights them up. Somebody's coming to me, they're like, oh, I'm kind of out of shape. I used to be more in shape, or I used to do these events. I did a triathlon 10 years ago or something. Like I want to get back into that stuff, but life is really busy. I've got my kids and I just can't take anything away from them. Okay, that's totally fine. Tell me what lights you up about the idea of doing that again. What excites you? Is it the exercise? Is it the achievement? And I really want to get clear on what fills you up because if the training is just going to take away from you emotionally, from you mentally, then that's not going to do any good for you and you're already overburdened life, right? So first, I want to, from a programming perspective, building a program, understand what can we put in this person's life that's going to improve their health, move them towards their goals, and that they're going to enjoy, or at least enjoy the feeling afterwards, right? Because some people at first aren't going to enjoy going to the gym, right? But then they'll enjoy feeling that feeling afterwards of accomplishment, the physical feeling after you exercise, right? And so first things first for somebody in that situation, I want to make sure that they are getting some enjoyment out of everything we're doing because they don't have room in their life to add another stressor, right? And so there's strategies we can do around that as well. If somebody hasn't exercised in a while, like removing friction points around things, like laying your clothes out the night before, already planning your out to the gym. I have some athletes where the first 2 weeks, they might not even work out. I'll tell them, I'll give them a workout plan and tell them, hey, this gym is on your way home and you've said you want to work out then drive to the gym, sit there for 5 minutes. That's all you have to do for the first week or two. If you go in and work out, that's icing on the cake, but we're going to consider this a win if you sit in the parking lot for 5 minutes and leave because we're building that win, that habit and that little win of doing the thing, right? And then if they work out, they feel even better about themselves. But if not, they've driven there and then they've driven home. And then we'll start to slowly layer things on. So for somebody in that instance, I don't want to overburden them with too many changes at once. But yeah, then it comes down to conversation strategically sometimes. If somebody's a single parent, they might literally not be able to do certain things because they have a kid. So then it's like, okay, we have family in town? Do we have the means for any babysitter or any daycare or like what do you want your life to look like? And so then individually we can get in on the strategy of how can we actually make this work for you? Can you get an indoor trainer for your bike and hop on that with the baby monitor next to you? Um, Obviously, you wouldn't go out for a run and leave your kid at the house. That's not safe. But if you're still in the house, can you get a treadmill? Can we get some dumbbells and get a workout in? Let's just get something going, build some momentum because once you've got that snowball rolling, then you can add more and more and more, and it's easier. But we really just need to get some little wins in. And it's really hard for some of these people to celebrate small wins. They don't even realize they have to celebrate small wins. They're just so hard on themselves. A lot of the language I hear is, oh, I just need to be more disciplined. I just need to work harder. Like I'm just kind of lazy, right? When in reality, you just need a clear vision of your goals, what you need to do to get there, and strategies because
Hmm.
you're overburdened, you have a lot going on. You're not going to discipline your way through that like you could when you were 20. You're not going to shame yourself through that like you could when you were 20. You need strategies in place to deal with everything.
Hmm. There's a lot to take away from that, and I have some unique examples of scenarios where this has happened in real life. Because sometimes people hear us talk and banter back and forth about like different kind of almost case studies or like theories, but these kinds of environment setups are happening all the time. So I actually have two examples. One example is you talked about getting to the gym, and even if you're at the gym sitting in your vehicle, like that's a beautiful start. And I have one person that I work with. Her name is Joan. She reviews the podcast quite regularly. Big fan of the podcast. And she has done that before. And sometimes she just gives herself a pep talk and then she goes into the gym. And that's a perfectly reasonable path to reaching your goals for the day. Sometimes it just takes a few steps. And then you brought up like having like a trainer within like a trainer for your bike within your home or even a couple dumbbells. I have another friend, she's actually a single mom, so she really has limited options as to what she can logistically do because she's got the kids at home. And so she started doing virtual workouts at 5 a.m. with her trainer. And she just has the two dumbbells and like a step and like maybe like a ab wheel, but it's very minimal setup. And she's asked me questions about protein and about creatine. So she's been really working on her nutrition. I'm not the coach that she's working with. I'm just glad that she's working with a coach and she's made huge progress. And that leaks into a person's just like their whole self-identity. Like when you talked about your military background, you kind of talked about like the ambition that comes from that, the drive that comes from that, the resilience that comes from that. And then when we take on like a physical pursuit that challenges us, that's like especially difficult, perhaps what may seemingly be the most difficult thing we've ever done in our life, it changes our identity. It allows us to do more difficult things. Like for a person who is in a parenting role, if they're able to crush an absolutely brutal workout, there is no doubt that that would contribute to their skills as a parent. Because if they have to be just a little bit more patient, or maybe they just have to listen a bit more carefully for things that they might not have heard the first time, like when a kid's trying to tell you something, they're probably going to have more bandwidth for that when they are training hard because just their body's going to be functioning a lot more. Whereas if they were deconditioned, if it hurt to walk up the stairs and something came up where they would have had to hear it twice to truly understand, they might not be as willing to hear it the second time. And they might lose their patience and it can be really impactful down the line. So it's indisputable that a person would benefit from just finding their own unique way to improve their health and fitness. And it's like I used to be hesitant to kind of preach that so much because I was, well, not everybody has to. But now I'm like looking at the statistics of North America. I'm like, no, you have to. Like there is no choice. You should. And that kind of brings me to my next point. Well, actually, I'll set us up first with kind of like a preface. And it is that I think in life we tend to have too strong of expectations of what should happen, and we don't spend as much time being in the present. Some examples being like, let's say somebody's starting a new relationship, and they're like, my expectation is that this is going to go this way, and then we're going to do this, and we're going to do this. Like maybe some people get a spark and they're like, oh yeah, and we're going to get married and we're going to have kids, and that's the way it's going to be. But they don't know. They don't know those answers until those things happen. And then for us, it could be like, let's think about our businesses. And we're like, okay, I'm gonna be here and I'm gonna be there, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. We don't necessarily know what's going to happen in the future. We know how we can set ourselves up at a micro level, to make the right trends. So, on a holistic level, what are some of those micro level things that you do for yourself that both benefit your personal life with your connections with your family and your friends, but also your professional life, in making sure that things are as under control as realistically possible?
It's funny that you brought up the relationship point because I just saw a reel on Instagram actually. It was somebody talking about relationships. I haven't dated in a long time, but they mentioned that if you run that out on a first or second date, it's very easy to fall in love with the idea of the person and not the actual person. And they were talking about how you need to stay in the moment because you can fall in love with somebody in your head and it's not actually who they are. So on that point, just because I was thinking about it, I actually think about this a lot as far as my goals. I say this a lot now, but the mountain looks really pretty from 10 miles away and it sucks when you're climbing it until you get to the top and then you get that cool view. But you don't get that cool view when you're on the mountain. And so I'm always asking myself, because I'm the type of person to overburden myself with activities and goals and things, am I in love with the idea of this and not the actual act? You need some of that idea, right? Because if there wasn't the triathlon in the future, it would be really hard to justify the 4 a.m. wake up to get on the bike or something. But you have to understand when you're setting a goal that it's gonna suck sometimes. It's not all gonna look like the runners behind you with the sunrise. That looks really pretty, but there was miles and miles of dark forest running to get to that sunrise. And so that's just something I ask myself a lot and make sure that I'm in check of what I actually want to do. Recently, for me, I've been looking at my master's, and for a long time, I've wanted to get my PhD. And it's really cool to say, oh, it'd be really fun to do research, but you have to understand that a lot of research is like 80% grant writing and like all this other political work to do the research. And so just everything has those like romanticized versions of themselves in the actual version. So I try to just make sure that I'm keeping myself in check there. But to your question about things that impact both, I think something that people don't think about enough is the physiological stress that they feel day to day being a parent or maybe working a very mentally demanding job or just juggling a lot of responsibilities. That's absolutely going to impact your training in a way that it's stress that your body has to recover from. Your brain consumes a ton of glucose, and your brain actually has to recover from a lot of the things you do. And you can see this at the end of a workday if you've had maybe a super long workday, some fire came up at work or something, and you ended up working 12 hours and it was all knowledge work, and then someone asks you like a technical question not related to your work, just maybe about a car or something, you're just like, dude, I can't like give me a minute. I need to doom scroll or just like stare at the ceiling and then I got you, right? And so from a parenting perspective or just a busy professional perspective, I work with a lot of people training for the military, tactical athletes, ultra endurance athletes, and these people can very easily beat themselves up because they're already under a lot of stress in their day to day. I've got a few, actually, interestingly, a few athletes that are the same exact profile. They're police officers by day and they're training for special forces selection in the National Guard as well. So they very, very stressful lives, right? Um, and you kind of have to get these athletes to realize you're building skills in your day-to-day life, stress management, that are going to pay off for your tactical profession or for your ultra marathon. Being a parent, there's a lot of things that you have to deal with day to day, and you might not draw the conclusions in the moment, but learning to regulate stress management, and then training on top of that is building skills that are going to help you, right? Not to say that somebody can't get that if they aren't a parent. I actually do intentionally sometimes for longer endurance athletes plan in a little bit more stressful things to kind of give them that mental test. Um, but everything you do is related. You mentioned it, right? You train in the morning, it makes you a better person throughout the whole day, it makes you feel better, interact with people better. And so it's finding those things that are interrelated and celebrating those because if you don't celebrate those, it's easy to get bogged down by the day to day. Like, oh my gosh, I have so much going on. I wanted to get this podcast planned, but then my son needed something and I got my workout to do. And oh, I did my workout and it felt a little off and I was hoping it wasn't going to. But if you can realize, oh, my workout felt off because I was super stressed from, poop got all over the room or something, right? And I had to clean all that up. And I actually had to cut my workout short. And so I felt kind of bad about that. And then something came up at work and I wasn't super happy with my performance there. And if you can just start to understand those things, it can pull you out of that negative cycle and be like, oh, no, I actually do have a lot going on. And like I should celebrate the performance I had because given everything, it was actually really good.
Hmm.
And like that's a win. And I've built a skill there and I can progressively overload stress in a certain way, right? Stress inoculation.
Yeah. I mean, like the way that you frame those in like helping people see the true perspective of their situation and the fact that they did do some things worth celebrating, like the number of times that I have that conversation with people is endless. And it's just funny because it's in so many different contexts, whether it's with like other coaches or whether it's with just general population people. And it's important because a lot of the time what happens is the most exposure that we have to other people, especially in today's world, is through the internet. And so like if most people were going to describe what they know about their friends, unfortunately, they'd be describing their perception of their friends through what they knew of their friends' social media. The only way to know that their perception was different was if they had like a track record of spending a lot of one-on-one time with these people. So like for me, what's benefited me is in my early 20s, I did a lot of traveling and it was like unique traveling. So it wasn't just like go to the resort and do the all-inclusive and kind of forget half the trip. It was like go to Hawaii and don't necessarily book a place and then find out where you're gonna sleep and it turns out it's on a beach, but then that beach doesn't allow you to sleep on it. So you go to different beach. Like this was a true story. This actually happened. And I connected with my friends on that trip so much because we really understood like what our risk tolerance was. We understood how to be brave because I was a big chicken, so I had to be brave. And we understood kind of like where our breaking points were. Like I got like super sick on the trip, and sometimes it's hard to travel with somebody who's super sick, and the super sick person can feel super guilty. But we figured it out, and it just kind of like it helped those interpersonal skills. I did other trips with other friends where we did backpacking in Costa Rica. And just being able to experience a different environment with a good friend and just seeing, oh, well, here in the hostel fridge, one of the food went bad, and so then the rest of the food went bad. Or this hostel fridge didn't keep the meat cold, so we gave ourselves food poisoning and nearly died. Like a lot of different scenarios can come up when you're traveling in these like 1-to-1 or 1-to-4 groups where like you are just living life with these people. And I think as the world evolves, people will compromise this opportunity for accepting that their social media connection is enough. And it's not that a social media connection doesn't count, because it does. It can bring in a lot of really cool people into your lives. But I think you should find people who are accessible to you to have like one-on-one connection with. And like a very accessible example that I do all the time, and I did in intense volumes a few months ago, or maybe a month ago, was just like I do a crazy amount of walk and talks. And I do these walk and talks where I completely detach from any expectation. Like some might think, oh, he's just doing a sales call. I'm like, no, I'm not doing a sales call. Or he might be like, oh, he's just going on a bunch of dates. I'm like, no, like 3/4 of these things we're just yapping away and it's like two dudes sometimes. And then sometimes people might be like, oh, well, he wants something from them. I'm like, I don't even know what they do. I don't know what I want. But it's just for me, it helps to reveal some of the things that I might not have considered. Sometimes that's like a blind spot. Sometimes it might just be how somebody else perceives me, and I might have like not really sort of latched onto it or understood it. There's a lot of people who want to kind of change their career. And earlier on, I would have thought, well, don't do it the way I did it because I don't know if I did it well. But nowadays it's kind of like, well, actually, you probably should do some things the way I did it because I'm actually doing it. Whereas there's a lot of people on the internet who claim to be able to do all these things and claim to be this person. And if you check their bank account, they're not there. Like, but for me, it's quite literally if I wanted to move somewhere else and keep working, I wouldn't skip a beat. But because I enjoy the in-person stuff, I do the in-person stuff. And sometimes sometimes the in-person stuff isn't the most lucrative part of my business, but it is at times some of the most rewarding. Not to say that it can't be, but just the facts are that like I'd probably make a better living if I never left my house, but I probably wouldn't be quite as fulfilled because there would be pieces missing. But all that to say that there's just so much to gain from like leaning into true connections. And so even circling back to what we talk about with role modeling, either for your kids or just for people in your community. There's lots of kids that run around in my neighborhood, and I think about them. I'm like, well, they're kind of hooligans and they're smashing windows and like scratching cars, but like maybe it's because they just don't really have an example to show them what they could do. Like maybe somebody has never coached them, or maybe somebody has never just led by example in their lives. Like something that brings me a lot of joy about seeing friends who are parents, especially now, because it seems that we're all kind of on the same page. We're all kind of thinking the same things. We're all like, we want to model this behavior for our kids, kind of thing. What brings me joy is seeing that in action because it can come in so many different flavors. It can come in so many different environments and settings and styles. Like a friend of the show, Smaj Hunter, he'll walk around with his baby in like a little baby holder thingy, and just about everything he does. I saw him at a conference with his baby on his chest. Like he's just rocking that baby everywhere he goes, which is a beautiful thing. And then another friend of the show, who I give shout outs all the time, Dean Guido, I have no doubt that his little one is going to be doing jujitsu at some point through her own choice because he is so passionate about it that it will undoubtedly become quite an infectious thing. And it's just like I can list off example after example after example. Like some parents do cool thing. Well, I'll give another shout out. Mike Dola, he built this magic like stair thing where it's like a slide that goes down the stairs and his kids just go down the slide. Like, or he'll do like these jumping things where the kids jump on like cushions and stuff. It's just so many different examples of showing kids how you can be active, but not only active, but active together. And in some cases where those kids have little siblings, then the kid gets to show the little sibling how they were active and how the other one can be active too. It's just it's something that excites me because the more we kind of popularize it, the more it can kind of become a trend where like all of a sudden all the cool kids are like teaching their kids how to be active. And then this new generation that's surrounded by all this technology that can distract you and make you feel disconnected even though you're connected. We can maybe perhaps create sort of like a path for people to be more active naturally without feeling like it's forced upon them, without feeling like they're doing something wrong if they don't do it a certain way. And where they're not alone because their parent chose to take initiative and take care of their health too, so that they could be active until they're 80, 90, or perhaps 100. You never know. Um, but with regards to that, is that ever something that sort of like lives rent free in your head?
Yeah, I mean, you said a lot there that I have thoughts on, but I mean, first, just I think you're speaking ma mainly about the parenting, and I do have thoughts on that. But first, you mentioned social media being real. That's something I've tried to do a lot. Is I've met a lot of awesome people through the internet, through Instagram specifically, and I've tried to make a really big effort in making those relationships more real. Whether it's going to, I went to a seminar earlier this year, having people on my own podcast, and so there's definitely a lot of positives. I just had an athlete that crushed his first marathon, and he was dealing with knee pain. I met him through Instagram. He's super. He's an engineer. We vibe on a nerdy level as well. But that relationship wouldn't have been possible without Instagram. And he mentioned in his testimonial that he filled out how like helpful the program was, how awesome it was, how he appreciated me reaching out to him. So that was just nice to see from a coach athlete perspective, but then just from a peer to peer, friend to friend perspective, I do try to make as many of those new relationships real as I can. Sometimes it's hard because people are spread across the world, but yeah, I mean, I think it's super important, and I've been trying myself to share more of the realistic day to day like life and more kind of be real honest and vulnerable about the things that I'm struggling with because people don't share that, and I don't think it's because they mean to. Maybe some people that are trying to put out some like aesthetic brand, like um, view of the world do purposely not do that, but it's just human nature not to share the things you're struggling with. And I've done it in the past where I've been really consistent on Instagram, on stories, on posting, and then I've had kind of a hard time and dropped off because it doesn't feel good to share those things and be vulnerable, but I think it helps people a lot. I've posted the last week even a few things, and I've had people message me like, "Oh my gosh, like thank you for sharing this. It makes me feel like I'm not broken. Like other people deal with these things too." And even the little things like I did 800-meter repeats the other morning, or sorry, 400-meter repeats, 8 by 400. And I didn't want to do it, and I did it anyways. But the way I got out the door, which is what I we talked about previously and what I've told athletes is just just get there, right? So I just said, like I'm not going to do these today. I'm just going to go do the warm up on the track and maybe just do a 30-minute run and be done. And I literally told myself I'm just going to do a 30-minute run. Got out to the track, did the warm up, and I was like, oh, I feel good enough to do the repeats. And that's like a psychological trick I do all the time because there are times when I don't want to work out, even though like it's for my goals and everything. And I'll just trick myself and be like, oh, you don't have to do it. Like, let's just go do an easy run. It'll be a check in the box. And then you do the warm up and you're woken up at that point. You feel ready and you do the workout. I posted that on my story, which it's not cool as a coach to say, "Oh, I didn't want to work out today," right? But I posted that on my story, and somebody literally messaged me and said, "This got me through my repeats today. Like, thank you. Like
Yeah.
I wasn't going to do them, and then I saw this." So I've just been trying to be more vulnerable and real in that regard, and I see a lot of other people do it too nowadays. I think it's catching on, but um, that was just something I wanted to share there as far as social media. But kids, man, like they're a sponge. They are. They soak up whatever's around them. I was lifting, and my son, we have a home gym here, and he would come out and start trying to play with the barbell and everything. So I ordered him a kids like barbell and dumbbells, and he loves it. He comes out and picks them up and brings them over to me. The time I actually decided to buy them because I'd been thinking about it for a while is my wife was doing split squats with two dumbbells, and she set them down, and he walked over to them and tried to pick them up. And I was like, oh, we need to get him something, because he
Yeah.
was trying to do what she was doing. And so I think about that a lot. I have a running stroller. We registered on our baby registry because they're like not cheap, but we have a running stroller, Bob running stroller. It's awesome. And I try to involve him in as much as possible. Sometimes it's not possible because sometimes the exercise is the personal time away from everything to just decompress from everything else I have going on. But I do try to involve him in as much as possible. I go into the gym now a lot more just because the social aspect, because I like getting out and seeing people. But when he's home, I do try to do the home gym so he can just see it, right? And he sees my wife working out. I think it's huge. Kids are sponges. They pick up what you do, right? Um, and like every little thing they pick up, it's the wildest thing to see. So now I have to really keep myself in check, right? Am I doing things that I actually align with my values and the way I
Yeah.
think he should be raised? Because our dog will stand there because my son will throw food off the high chair, and my dog never begged, but now he stands there, and so I would tell him no, like get away from the high chair, like go lay down. And my son has started just telling him no when he's in the high chair, and I'm like, oh shoot, like those little things you don't even notice. So I don't know if that answered your question, but
No, it did.
hopefully it did. Okay, cool.
It did. It did. So there's just so many things that we could expand on from here. But one of the directions that I want to go is with regards to Future travel plans. I always like talking travel with people. I like to know where they want to go. Like I know for myself, travel feels like it goes similar to fitness for me. Like I want to be able to find ways to take care of myself, and that can evolve over time. Because just life evolves. Like there's been times when I had more sessions at the gym, and so it's very straightforward. It's like do your session, then work out, then do another session, maybe another little workout, then another session. But now it's a lot of like work from home. It's a lot of changing schedules. It's a lot of like changing social circles and stuff, just where it's like a lot of my friends have moved away or friends have become parents. And so their availability changes. And so then I have to kind of reinvent my own routine. All that said, for me, travel always fits into it, even if it has to be a short trip. But for you, I'd love to hear perhaps what are some of the ideas that you've got for yourself for some like non-work activities that you're gonna do in the months and years to come.
Yeah, totally. Travel's a huge thing for me. My wife and I want to go to all the national parks. I get in free to the national parks as a veteran, so that's nice. But there's a national park, Glacier National Park up here in Maine. So we're in Virginia Beach, so it's a ways away, but it's on the same coast. We want to go there. More short term, we're going to go up to DC in December before we go back to the Midwest for Christmas to see family and everything. Other than that, I've lived in Florida, really pretty. Went to Miami earlier this year. I lived in San Diego for a while in California. We love that. My wife and I did a road trip actually from San Diego up to Yosemite National Park, El Capitan, where like free solo, if you've seen that.
Yeah.
That was the most surreal experience because by the time, I don't know how it is now, this was in 2019, but by the time you get into the valley, I didn't have cell reception for like 2 hours. And for me, that's a big thing because it's like the most natural and free, like nobody can contact you no matter what. And you get into the valley and it's the most quiet place ever. Like super quiet. And everything's so big, it makes you feel so small and it kind of puts everything in perspective, as far as nothing really matters that you're stressed about. I love getting to places like that, so I would go back there in a heartbeat. But we have other places we want to go that we've never been. But then from there, we went over to San Francisco and took a road trip down the California coast. Super beautiful. Definitely recommend it. Um, but San Diego is an easy place to go back to because they have great food. The beach is awesome there. That's another thing for me. I love going to the beach and just looking out at the ocean at the horizon because it reminds you like, oh, I'm just like a small human on this floating rock, and my problems are not as big as I thought they were, right? Um, I'd like to take my wife to Hawaii. I went there in high school. I would like to take her there. Similar thing, we had a waitress who when we were there, my mom liked to talk to everybody, and she moved to Hawaii with no money. She literally bought a tent and a machete and slept on the beach until she got a job. And so you're talking about the beach made me think of that. Um, yeah, I love travel. I love the out west. I love I want to go to the Grand Canyon. I want my son to experience a lot of the stuff that I um wanted to experience growing up. We traveled a lot, but yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff on the plate. There's California, there's the Pacific Northwest, Hawaii, ton of stuff. But more realistically, we're gonna try to stay on the East Coast while we're here and do as much as we can here before we kind of venture out anymore.
Yeah, well, I think just it's so important to kind of go on adventures. Like my parents, I bring them up a lot just because like I mean I talk to them pretty regularly, so I know what they're up to. And whenever there's like a stagnant time in their life, like they could completely just do nothing if they wanted to, as most retired people can. But they like to fill their days with activities. And so they're on a bunch of different like boards and they're on a bunch of committees and they volunteer and they do all these things. But when finally they get a day when they have some free time and there's nothing going on, they like to go on little road trips to take pictures of birds or go for a walk. I've kind of given them no option but to go on a walk every day. I got my mom a Fitbit so she can track her steps to see when she's getting lots of steps and when she's really not because I think we all fall into that trap that we do a lot of housework and stuff, and we're like, oh, I got my steps, and it's 1700. And so it's like, no, you still need to go for a walk, whether you like it or not, like no matter what's going on. Just because like walking, even if you use like walking sticks or even if you walk for a shorter distance, walking is just going to help. But all that said, just that general like philosophy of like filling your life with adventures, no matter what stage you're at in your business, no matter what stage you're at in your family life, your personal life, etc. I think it's essential. And the work is always going to be there if we leave some of it to go on an adventure. Like it never stops coming. And like I can definitely attest to that. Like I haven't finished a to-do list in like years. And it just seems amplified now because it's like as you progress in life and career, the to-do list feels more serious and like critical. But even if I did them all, even if I did all the things, there'd be more things because especially as you get better at the things, more people ask you to do more things. So if anybody's out there being a workaholic, just stop for a second and maybe like take the afternoon to go for like a 4 hour walk or to go take bird pictures or now that we're in winter, like it's snowing here in Edmonton, there's going to be lots of opportunities to potentially go to outdoor rinks or go snowshoeing or go on a hike at a local national park. I like doing that. We've got lots of sort of like mountain parks, either national parks or just like preserved areas where it's just fantastic for snowshoeing and you get some good thinking done. You can listen to an audiobook. I find it's very enriching. So I'm hoping that that inspires people to kind of like maybe it'll inspire someone to change their plans for the day. Maybe they plan to just work hard all day and like take no time because they had these deadlines. I'm here to say, just put a pause on like the crazy deadlines, go for a walk, then you come back and finish your deadlines and you'll be done your project by like end of day Sunday. But with that said, Justin, do you have some parting advice for my audience, something that could potentially set them up for a really great week ahead?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, for me, based on just what you just said, right? That's what I love about trail running. I like to lift, hence the hybrid thing, but I love to get out trail running because it's a super welcoming community and you can trail run in some of these races. You could walk the whole thing and be fine, right? And nobody's gonna give you a hard time like they might if you are a road runner. So just a note on that, I like that. But yeah, parting advice, I mean, for me, there's two different types of people that could use advice. One, the people like me, very type A, very workaholic, right? After this podcast, have blocked the whole rest of the day off just for family time to relax and fill my cup up because, like like we mentioned before, you need something to pour out to help other people. And so for me, I genuinely love those activities, but something that I heard recently that I kind of helps me is thinking of myself as a knowledge athlete in a way. So like Michael Jordan, if he loves basketball, right, and all he does is play basketball, but he plays basketball until his arm hurts, he's not going to be worth anything to the Chicago Bulls, right? And so for me, if I just let myself work 24 hours a day like I would naturally do if I didn't have any constraints that I put in my life, I'm not going to be worth anything to anybody else, and my work quality is going to suffer. And so, like, if I want to be my best for my family, for my business, for everything, I have to make myself rest, which sounds horrible because I do enjoy spending time with my family. I do enjoy resting. It's just my default is to just kind of work, right? And so, in a way, sometimes I think of myself as a knowledge athlete where I have to take time off to rest and recover. And so, the rest of this day today is rest and recovery with the family to enjoy and have fun and not even think about work. And then I can pick back up later. And then for the person who says, "Oh, I feel that's not me. I feel horrible. Like I'm just so lazy." You're not really lazy. Like sometimes I wish I could be lazy. Everybody wishes they were somewhere else sometimes, and sometimes I wish I could be lazy. When it comes to people that tell me they're lazy, most of the time it's just strategy. They just don't know, right? For whatever reason, they're not a bad person because they don't know, right? Maybe they just didn't have the right environment or whatever. And so there are strategies you can put in place to make yourself succeed, and it's not because you're lazy. It's just because whether it's a mental reframe or actual tactical things you can do in your day, you're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. You just need someone to sit with you and help you figure that out, as Chris knows because he coaches and does this. And yeah, that would be my advice is if you're a type A person, take some time to relax. If you shame yourself into feeling horrible, don't do that. You're not horrible. Um, have some self-compassion and then just put some strategies in place.
That's awesome. And I will let you know that this episode will be published today.
Oh,
So our
solid.
audience, they're going to get our conversation shortly after we completed it. But with that said, Justin, thank you so much for coming on to the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It was a good time. I always love talking to you.